It's a monthly open space for professionals to chat all about software development, delivery, and reliability. I'm Sam Fell, and today's topic is cloud migration. And most cloud migrations are filled with continuous learning, experimentation, and improvement. And successful migrations require a shift in mindset, new tooling, and system-wide optimization of processes and practices. Join this panel as we discuss how to map out your cloud migration, what are some of the common pitfalls to avoid, and what are some best practices and proven patterns that can help aid success. And so normally at this time, well, here, first let me go through the introductions of the panelists that we do have here. You'll notice that we're missing my partner in crime, Mitch Ashley, who is generally on these things. He had some computer issue. We were all sitting there talking, and all of a sudden he froze. So he'll be back in just a second. But let me go down the line here and introduce the other folks. We're really thrilled to have so many great practitioners and thought leaders on the program. Let's start with Ramesh. Hey, Ramesh, how you doing? Doing well, Sam. Nice to be here and be part of this panel. My name is Ramesh Dwarkanath. I'm a senior enterprise solutions architect at Amazon Web Services. I am based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and I help our Northeast enterprise customers, with their cloud journey. Depending on what their challenges are, business or technical, we try to find solutions for them. Excellent. Love that. Thank you for joining us. And I see some people putting their names and where they're from in Slack. Love to have the audience participate in these. On the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see a chat window, public presenters. Hit the public chat. We're not really checking Q&A so much because we want the Q&A in the chat so that all of the audience can see it. And let us know where you're joining us from. Hi, Vern. Nice to see you. All right, next on the list, Bruno.
Hey, everyone. Welcome. My name is Bruno. I'm founding head of strategy here at Sumo Logic. We are a platform for observability and security, cloud native. We help our customers collect, analyze, and understand their machine data and operate and secure their mission-critical applications and systems.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruno. Nice to have you here. Mitch, I'm going to swing back around to you. You were making us all a little nervous in the beginning there, pal, but it's great to have you back. I explained to the audience that we were having some technical issues, but you're back now, so can you introduce yourself?
Happy to do that. Thank you, Sam. Mitch Ashley, I'm principal with TechStrong Research. I'm also CTO with the company and have gone through a few cloud migrations, so I'm excited to talk with this topic with this wonderful panel and you.
Awesome. Oh, okay, the wonderful panel and me. I get it. All right.
And you. And you, wonderful you. Yes.
Thank you. All right. Here's a returning face. Some of you may not know him, but I've seen this fellow a lot. Mike Kavis, welcome to the program.
Hey, great to be here. I'm Mike Kavis, Chief Architect at Deloitte. Been working in the cloud space for a long time and happy to be here.
Wonderful. Glad to have you here. And last but not least, Maulik, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Sam. My name is Maulik. I've been in the enterprise IT space for 20 years and currently at Automation Anywhere, helping run their cloud service. Glad to be here.
Lovely. Yeah. So we've got a lot of great expertise on the line here. Folks from all over different industries who have gone through cloud migrations and who are really eager to share their knowledge and their experience with us. So this slide is for you in the audience. Speak up. This forum is for you. I see some people putting their names and putting some things in chat. Keep it up. I love that. Be respectful. If you're not respectful, we're just going to boot you from the program because there's no room for that here. And share some feedback. If there's stuff that we're doing that you think is great, let us know. If there's stuff that we're doing that you think we can do better, please let us know that as well. So let's warm up that chat. If you haven't already, put your name and where you're joining us from in the chat, and that'll help us get to know you a little bit better. To start the program, the first thing we're going to do is that our friends over at DevOps.com and TechStrong Research, they do a poll for us, a survey, a social survey on their site to help us kind of get into the mindset of what we're talking about here. So Cody, can we run our first poll, please? We're going to ask the audience, what are your biggest cloud migration challenges? And you can select all that apply. Is it the skills that your teams have in finding the right people or finding the right skills, helping them skill up? Security, prioritization alignment, complexity, or other. It could be all of them. I'm going to say, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to say. I'm not going to lead the witness. And then Cody, when you think we have a solid number of answers, let's go ahead and pop up the responses for people. What are your biggest? Oh, wow. Look at that. Skills. Huge, huge margin. I love it. Here comes the other ones. Okay. Okay.
Some
Hello,
great
everybody.
responses.
Great to see everybody chiming in on the chat. We love to see it. Look at that. Skills is just pegged. And then complexity. Look at that. Complexity came roaring back. People waking up and realizing that, oh my gosh, all the stuff that they're doing is so complex. Right? All right. So let's go to the next slide. Let's see what the folks, oh, interesting. So this audience is pretty aligned with what we were seeing across everybody who went to the DevOps.com site. We had about 700 people respond. And so it seems that scales, right? Skills is a huge problem for cloud migration right now. And so that's going to be something I'm going to be interested in, I think, in following up on as part of this conversation. So Mitch, what you missed was exactly the same data, basically. We're looking at a mirror image of exactly the same stuff. So skills and the complexity of those applications seem to be some of the big challenges that our audience is addressing. So that's fantastic. We'll make sure we talk about that.
Almost exactly the same. Very close.
Right? It's pretty amazing, right? All right. So our next polling question, Cody, if you would please. Describe your current or planned cloud operating model and select all that apply. So this one's funny. Same silo, new names, right? Or the platform team is the new bottleneck, or shared responsibility between DevOps and infrastructure, or all of the above. All right, so I know which one I think that it is. Let's see what people say. All right. Same silo, new names, all of the above. Okay. Look at that. So it seems like we've sort of found some things that resonate with the audience over here, right? That lift and shift, same sort of cultural silos, data silos, technical silos, different names. And shared responsibility between DevOps and infrastructure. That I like to see that one, right? We'd love to see that. All right, Cody, let's see. How does this match up? Same silos, new names, and all the above, right? So it's very interesting.
Close, yeah.
The platform team is not becoming the bottleneck for most people. It's they're taking these different teams, moving them into the cloud, but they still have maybe a new name, cloud operations, right? Malik, that's your appellation, right? Cloud ops. Excellent.
Maybe a good sign we've evolved past the Phoenix project. It's not the platform team that's the limitation, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. For those of you, if you've read the Phoenix project, put me a +1 in the chat here. Let's see who out there has read the Phoenix project. And if you think you should read the Phoenix project, put a +100. And let's see who thinks that the Phoenix project is the book to read. Great book by Gene Kim and George Spafford from Gartner. Interesting read. All right. So, oops, sorry. Next question. I was leading the witness there. What has been the impact of your cloud migration on your business? Would you say it's net positive? Would you say it's neutral? Would you say it's net negative? Or would you say it's sort of unknown yet? You're not quite sure. What are we thinking? And let's pull up. Yep, there we go. Net positive. Look at that. I don't know. There's almost, it looks like about an equal number of people that are getting benefit from it than who don't know yet, because they're probably in the middle of it. So I think this topic is going to be super helpful for that 38% of folks there who are 35% who maybe aren't quite through it yet. The ones that are net positive, good for you. That's amazing, right? There's so many advantages and so many things to take advantage of there. It's wonderful that you're feeling that. All right, Cody, thank you for that. Let's go to see what the other results were. Net positive again. Very, very similar.
Very similar,
Right?
almost spot on.
Yep. So that's
Maybe a little
fantastic.
higher neutral.
Yeah,
Pretty
and lower net
close.
negative.
Mm-hmm. But it is certainly interesting to see, and I love the fact that there are so many people that are having a net positive effect with this cloud migration, which is a huge cultural change. It's a huge technical change, a lot of process change. So to be able to get through that and be on the other side and to see the value is fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, audience. I love that there's some folks here, plus oneing and plus 100ing. These are folks who must have, and Steve Weber puts the $100 in, which is awesome. I like that too. That's even better. That means he's really gung-ho to buy those books for people, which is fantastic. But
I'd really love to. Sorry, Sam. I'd really love to talk to that 5% of people who said it was net negative. I'd love to understand what it is that they think that caused that.
awesome. So if anybody who's listening, you're on LinkedIn, everybody must be on LinkedIn, send a message to Bruno and he would love to chat with you. I would love to chat with you too. This is the power of the community. All we're doing here is learning. Maybe you're learning, maybe we're learning. All right. So let's go over to the panel. Let's figure this out. So what we're talking about here is cloud migration. When and why does a cloud migration make sense? And I'm looking at the folks in the audience as well. People from New York, people from all over the world are here. What are your thoughts? When and why does it make sense to do a cloud migration? I'm going to start with, let's see, Ramesh. I'm starting with you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think it's almost like now some of the obvious ones are cost savings, right? You start off with cost savings because you want to get onto the cloud, and it's going to be less less expensive and easier to manage and so on. You might have some sort of a compelling event like a data center closure or lease getting ending or something like that. But some of the things that are a little bit more forward looking are things like business agility, right? Innovation, digital transformation, because you're probably reaching some sort of a ceiling in your existing on-prem infrastructure, right? It's taking longer time to provision. It's a lot more expensive. You don't have necessarily the tools that you can build upon, and so on, right? So that is really I think those are and security, right? So it used to be everything used to be on-prem located.
Yeah.
That's secure, but hey, that whole thought process is changing.
I remember those conversations. There's no way I'm putting my critical business applications up in the cloud. And this was then at probably the same time where everyone was putting all their business critical information in Salesforce.
Yes.
Right. And so you're wondering to yourself, like, what's the difference? Right?
And it's the same people who said, I'll never put my stuff on the internet, 20 years before that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very compelling, you bring up a lot of good reasons why it's a compelling switch, right? That agility, that capacity, that elasticity, the economics, it's all good stuff. But I don't know, Ramesh, specifically when you're talking with your customers, because this is what you do for a living, is to guide people on these migrations. So when does it make sense for folks to try and do that? Like, why? Is there a better, think about the audience and what are they looking for to be like, here's a good opportunity for me to try this one?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of times it is, it really, we start off with, things like, what is your business impact, right? I mean, that's really where we start off from. At the end of the day, any cloud migration or any such exercise should not, while it is driven primarily by IT technology, right? That really should not be the focus of it. At the end of the day, you're trying to do something better for your business, right? That's really, so you kind of work backwards from your business requirements and in saying, okay, what is it? What are the challenges we are facing? Do we want to, innovate in this area because we want to increase revenue, right? Or we want to have, you want to improve your operational efficiency, or in general, right? So those are like
Start
taking
with the business problem, yeah.
Right, and start from there, and that's really kind of a driving point, because at the end of the day, if you drive from those business drivers, you get a lot more participation within the organization, right? Right from not just from technology, but even from the non-technology folks. And that's really the recipe for success at the end of the day. Right.
All right. So what I just heard there was that alignment between the business, what the business wants, and what the technology is delivering is important. All right. That's a great one, Ramesh. I love that. Bruno was using a channel that none of you have to try and Slack me to tell me I have something to say here. So he's skipping in line. So Bruno, what would you like to say about this topic?
You outed me, man. Come on.
He's got it in. He's got a separate channel.
Yeah. I'm going to focus on two different things. One is that I think when it's the right time, I think the right time is when a company realizes that specialization and shedding non-essential activities is good for business. Right? One of the things that I think, and I've seen time and time again with customers of ours, is when they sort of have this mental shift from, I can run my own hardware, I can run my own facilities, power, backup, all of that stuff better than somebody else. And instead of spending that energy focusing on, I don't know, making shoes or, delivering food or whatever.
Adding value on top of it.
Exactly. So that's one thing. And I think that really needs to become a philosophical change in the company. But the other one is that I really like to focus, and I kind of think of the cloud as not so much as a cost play or anything like that. I think in my mind, cloud is an agility play. And I think when a company starts building software using agile methodologies for their digital business, cloud enables you to evolve your hardware at the same rate you're evolving your software. So when you switch to agile and you start writing software and evolving it on a weekly, daily basis, cloud enables you to evolve your hardware at the same rate if you need to, right? And that creates essentially an ability to optimize that technology stack and really gain the benefits of both the high-speed development and the agility of the cloud. So I think, those might be some trigger points in a life of an enterprise as they're deciding when to go.
Nice.
I think just one point to add on that was like the disruptors, right? I mean, today with the scale of the cloud, every industry has disruptors. And what really drives that is the resources available to them. With cloud, it's almost like, almost an infinite amount of resources available to anybody and everybody who can get on, right? So now it's really a question of, what do I want to do with my business, right? How do I want to disrupt, get ahead of that, right? And do it on my own. And that's one of the other reasons why you want to start looking at cloud and migration.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Mike, we haven't heard from you yet. What are your thoughts? When and why does cloud migration make sense?
So I agree with everything everyone said, so I won't repeat those points, but I'll take a developer view on it. Back in the day before consulting, when I had a problem to solve, my infrastructure and my database technologies were already defined for me, regardless what my business problem was, right? So they weren't optimal systems. Now I go to this platform and, let's say, we're an Oracle shop, but I have a business requirement to use a document database. It's just an API call away. I don't have to do an RFP against all these databases. I don't have to go hire and train all these DBAs. It's just an API call, right? Mm-hmm. I can also go get the exact right amount of memory and compute that I need to solve that problem. In fact, on the database side, I may now use 6 different databases because there may be a reason to do some caching, or maybe a reason to use a SQL database, or maybe document. It empowers the architect to use the right tools for the job. Where in my past life, it was like everything's in Oracle and everything's on this big LPAR system, and by the way, you're sharing it with everyone else. Good luck, So I think it creates endless possibilities to create really highly available, resilient architectures.
And so the self-service aspect of that, you mentioned the developers. I think that the self-service aspect of that is huge, right? Because you don't want a painter to have to stop painting in the middle of when they're inspired to paint the Michelangelo, you don't want them to have to stop and go get more paint.
Well, right? And I can use any paint I want, where before I may only had 3 paints to work with, right?
That's right. Yeah, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. Yep. Go ahead and make a picture. Yeah. Awesome. All right, Malik, I saw your head nodding a few times there. What are your thoughts on this?
I think just everybody's pretty much covered most of it. I think going on to Mike's point, it's the barrier to entry has been reduced greatly. Right? As a startup, I can just go to any of these public clouds, launch my service in a matter of hours or days, if you will. And that's been the real power of the cloud. And people see that they don't need to go plan like when I used to work back in the day. To bring up a data center meant you had to plan at least 3 to 4 months ahead of time. And that all of that complexity, that barrier to entry is completely gone. And now you're focused on more value above the stack, if you will, right? And that's basically what we're seeing is the value of cloud migration, or why people want to move to the cloud. Obviously, the key driver there is make sure, as everybody said, your business aligns with that. It shouldn't just be, oh, the cloud is great and technically awesome, so let me move there. But the business also has to make sense from it. So it's a matter of both.
Right. Yep. Awesome. All right. And Mitch, bring it home.
Yeah, a couple things I would add. I think some fundamental levers have flipped in let's say the last 5 to 10 years about moving to the cloud. Early on, it was financial. It was about easy access. Anybody with a credit card get access to resources. But we managed our infrastructure as a capacity widget, if you will. That was the main thing, is how long is this hardware going to last us till we run out of capacity? And really, we flipped that variable from a capacity to flexibility and responsiveness to the business. So our ability to evolve our infrastructure, if you want to think of the cloud as the infrastructure we're building on, it has changed in terms of the pace of how quickly we need to be able to evolve it. Matter of fact, just more than just an evolution. Sometimes it's revolutionary steps here, evolutionary here. So really rethought how we think about infrastructure today, about it being responsive to the business rather than an asset-based mindset that we take. I think the other is we started to build more cloud native and do different things, new capabilities we had because of the cloud and services put on top by cloud providers, AWS and others. That has created new kinds of application, new ways of doing applications, which also increases the use of the platform that's easiest to do on the platform cloud. So we kind of flipped over a tipping point here between thinking old mindset to new. We still have one leg in the one camp, one in the other, but we're much more moved into the cloud side.
Right. Excellent. All right. Undifferentiated workload outsourced to the cloud. Right. Your mess somewhere else. Right. So for folks that are not there yet, I mean, I guess there was a pretty big percentage of folks who had already sort of made the switch and they were seeing some good benefit. There's a lot of them that were sort of TBD. They didn't know yet. We also saw some statistics around skills was a problem. And so taking those two factors into consideration, what do we think for the folks that are in the audience that are in the middle of their journey or just getting started? How should they get started? What's a good way for them to sort of pick this up? Do they start with training people? Do they start with investigating the clouds that they want to use? Do they start with looking at the different business problems that they want to solve? Let's see. Mike, why don't you start?
Always start with the problem statement, right? What problems I can solve, and let's start with an app or two that we can make life better for the consumers of that app in the cloud. So an example is I had a client who had an application that had all kinds of latency issues because it was calling from a data center in Australia to a data center in the States. And they chose that because they felt with some of the distributedness of the cloud where I can have content out on the POPs and all that, they could solve that problem. So now it was low risk because it was just public information. So they're a financial institution. So there's a lot of people with folded arms saying no cloud. So they went into the cloud without, highly sensitive data, but they still wanted to solve a problem. And once they solved that problem, there was an appetite to solve more problems. So a lot of times people do the low hanging fruit and it doesn't make a difference to the business. So it's hard to get more buy-in, but the key is do something that will drive more buy-in, right? Because you eventually want to move more and more to the cloud to take advantage of everything that's out there.
Yeah, and that's you did that at Cloud Technology Partners. You've done that for years. I won't say how many years, but lots and lots of years.
Well, I did it before consulting, right? I did it as a startup, and with no money, and built what I couldn't build when I worked for a company. I didn't want to go to the cloud because they were trying. So, long story short, in the retail business, we were sending updates to databases in the store every day. Modem squeaking and all that stuff. And I'm like, why don't we just bring it back to the cloud? And no, don't do that. And then we went and did a startup, and we did exactly that, and then sold it to their competitor.
Nice. Yep, there you go. That's the disruption that Ramesh was talking about. It's a bunch of you don't need to buy 1,000 Solaris boxes anymore to do your builds. You can just get somebody else to do it. I love it. All right, Bruno, what are your thoughts? What are some good ways for folks on the call to get started with their cloud migration?
Mine is very similar to Mike's, unfortunately, so I won't add much. But I've been asked this question quite a few times. Sort of in our consultative arrangements with our customers. And my typical answer is, obviously find a problem, like Mike said, but it is also try to keep the scope relatively small at the beginning. I've seen failed cloud migration projects where, a large institution will take, top 100 applications and try a whole hog migration and, get stuck somewhere and really burn themselves. Take a project well carved out, an application or two, something that's meaningful, something that will teach you a bunch of best practices where you will be able to exercise the new skills you're developing, and then apply those learnings to other things. So don't start too big. But do start with something meaningful. Otherwise, like Mike said, it won't really drive any more desire to do it, right? And so that's what I would say.
Is there a sense that people should sort of have a DevOps sort of mindset or some agile mindset? Skills was a huge, by numbers, skills was a big one. So what do folks recommend? Let's move into maybe what do folks recommend to help get people started on how to educate people or how to get them ready for the shift in operations and in the shift in the mindset of being in a cloud versus being on premise. We were talking about this before this started, and it used to be a badge of honor to say that you'd had a server that had been up for 700 days or whatever. Like, wow, look at this server. It hasn't been down for this many days. Like now people look at a server that's been up for 3 days and they give it the side eye, like this thing's there's something weird going on there. We gotta spin it. We gotta turn it over. Right. So these are all
chaos monkey algorithm isn't working well if it's up for 3 days.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So what are some of those, if you're the how you should get started, maybe another part of that question is the culture or the other apparatus around the actual motion. So Mitch, I'm going to head over to you. What are your thoughts on this?
Great question. I think there has to be an impetus for doing this, and I don't think it has to be DevOps has to start first or other things have to start first. But you do want to make it a size of a problem that you can solve. Maybe a sizable one, but it doesn't have to be eat the elephant. It isn't like the old data center move from DC to New York, poof, over the weekend, and it's gigantic switch that flips. So just share some personal experiences. Access to capital can be a really good reason. Well, you may not have to spend that capital now, but you can get to the cloud over the period before you would need the capital, for one example. It could be growth. Another situation I went through was just growth in the applications and the services that we were offering. We just had the people capacity to take that all on ourselves. So SaaS applications, some of our infrastructure, and a third was situation was being able to iterate more quickly on our application development. We didn't have the development environments. We didn't have the test environments. We didn't have all of that. And that coupled more directly with a DevOps kind of approach. So as we moved into DevOps, moved more into the cloud, and took those steps forward. So there can be multiple paths, but there's a driver behind it other than Mitch says it's a good idea or the CIO read it in the airplane magazine. Now that we're back in airplanes, so somewhat, there's a better reason than that because that's going to help you build the case, build the momentum, understand why we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now we read it on Twitter, so.
Yeah, now it's a tweet. Yeah. I saw Bruno's tweet. We must need to do that.
Right. That's right. Yeah. All right. Malik, what are your thoughts on this? You folks were cloud born, right, Malik? Automation Anywhere? Or do you guys have some legacy stuff as well, or is it all cloud?
No, we actually moved from an on-premise to a complete cloud native service.
There you go.
But so thank you for the leading question.
Yeah.
But no, going back to what Mitch was saying, I think it's absolutely essential that as you start this, once you prioritize and you know which application or which set of applications you're moving first, you incorporate the DevOps mindset, which is make sure developers are collaborating with whoever's doing the infrastructure. Because if you don't do that, you'll end up just having a copy of your on-prem data center in the cloud, and neither will you see the value, nor will you get all the gains from other people saying, "Hey, what the heck? My cost just went up 10x by moving this whole 1,000 servers in my data center to the cloud." Right? So you can't do it that way. You have to have that mindset. It's always a challenge, and the way we approached it, at least when we did our migration, was initially we at least hired a couple of folks who are architects who had done this before in the cloud to set the tone for the rest of the team and the developers as to how we should do this, what are the various aspects, get their experience in there. It's a good mix, and there's always push and pull, but that was the only way we could get started and see the value. Other than that, we would have been struggling and just taken like lift and shift basically, which wouldn't have helped.
Right. And so was the prioritization, and if we go into too much detail and you want me to stop, then just say so, but was there some prioritization exercise that you went through, and who was involved in that, and were sort of some services, lower level services prioritized? Like how did that work for you?
Right. So the way we did it was we took one of our the core application service itself, and that was the one we chose because obviously it was the main service, but that was what we had to go first with. There was no other way to move the ancillary services without moving this. So that was the people who were involved were obviously the core platform engineering team. It was a bunch of folks in the cloud operations team working with them to understand what needed to be done to get this out there. In our case, we, most people say, hey, start small or what have you. In our case, we didn't have a choice but to start with the elephant in the room, move that up there, and then after that, we started moving the ancillary services. Just because the way the platform was architected, there wasn't a simple way to break it out. And you'd always have this question, right? Should I re-architect and move to the cloud, or do it after I move? And from a business perspective, we didn't have a choice but to move first and then take on some of the architectural optimizations. So, but again, people have different journeys. So.
Yeah, I love that. Can you give us a sense of time scale for part of the project, or?
Yeah, I think when we started out, it was, and we actually spent almost 3 months on just discovery and planning before we actually did any of the actual work for infrastructure code or what have you. And it took us about 6 months to move this core platform service from on-premise onto the cloud, which isn't that bad compared to where we started with. But we got lucky on a few areas. The on-premise application wasn't completely a monolith, so we could break things out pretty easily. And also, it was written in a programming language that we had the skill set for, like Java, as opposed to like Ruby on Rails or something else. So it took us about 6 months to move, or 7 months, I think, to move from on-premise to cloud. But we spent a whole bunch of time on planning and discovery, which served us really well. And today we're actually multi-cloud. Like we could run the workloads on multiple public clouds because of the investment we put early on.
Because you did you measured twice, right? And then you cut once, but it can go in any place you need it to go, which is super smart. Yeah, that's great. I love that. And so the application that you said it took 6 months. I mean, Automation Anywhere is kind of a huge company. And so that application, is that what your customers are using? Is that the application that folks are logging into and using?
Yes, that's what our cloud service. That's at least the main area where they log into, and then we've added about 5 different additional services on top since this was done in
Amazing.
2019. So we're 3 years into the journey, and so now we have a whole bunch of more services around it. And the journey continues. We're still seeing other things we can add on. We've acquired a couple of companies, so that integration is going on as well.
Nice. Yep, that's great. There's always going to be something to do, right? There's always change. There's always new technology to fold in or experiment with. That's really cool. I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. That's awesome. Ramesh, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people trying to migrate to the cloud. What are some of the things that you tell your clients to help them get started on a good path?
Yeah, no, I think Malik brought up a couple of really good points around that initial thought process around the assessment of it, right? So I think part of the thing what also comes out of that is the trends, right? Patterns, right? What patterns do you see? So that way makes your subsequent migrations a lot faster, easier, because now you've already figured out what to do for a type of workload, for a type of application, or whatever the case might be, right? So that's one thing. And the other thing is, like we've always said, I mean, it's a paradigm shift, right? I mean, it's a thinking process. So you have to think about, if you go to the cloud, to really leverage the cloud better, you need to leverage things like scalability, right? Auto scaling.
Yep.
Things like nothing being agnostic. Cattle, not pets, right? Treating as servers, right? Things like that. I mean, those are all concepts that people have to get comfortable with before they go on. Otherwise, it's just going to be like, anything that's here, it just moves on.
That's right. They'll have a server up in Amazon that's 7 years old. It hasn't been down in 7 years. Right. Look at the uptime on this server. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. I love that. So, I mean, with the work that you're doing with folks, like, do you pull in different parts of the team, or when they bring you in, what's that remit? What are you helping people with? Are you asking some of these questions about which workloads to move, or have they already sort of decided, or?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the assessment is actually a very critical part of the whole piece. Like you need to really understand your landscape. You really need to understand what is it, where you need to spend your time on, right? And like I said, I mean, initially we talked about picking up some low-hanging fruit, and that definition changes, right? Depends on, some people want to get a quick win, right? So yeah, you pick an application for a quick win, but some people others say, I want to make a bigger impact with this particular application. So some of those priorities change based on what you want to do, but in order to even to do that, you need to understand what those dependencies are. That's a huge aspect of it, right? I mean, it's not just one, isolated application you're going to, and that's never the case, right? There is always dependencies on something else and something else. So you just want to make sure that all of that is kind of uncovered, at least from one workload, one application perspective. Identify that, create, and then you start to create, like, when you identify these kind of applications, you bucket them. That also drives your kind of DR, disaster recovery strategy, because now you have this tiering of applications, and RTOs and RPOs are defined based on that. So there are a lot of things that really come out of this whole assessment to say, okay, this is my landscape, this is what I have. And some of those are like, oh, I didn't even know this application existed, right? And it's like, hey, let's just retire this, and just get rid of this. We don't even need to use this. Things like that are, some positive offshoots that come out of that.
I love that. You just made me think of something. I'm going to put the question in the chat. When was the last time you EOL'd an application? I'm expecting to not get very many responses because it's something that doesn't happen very often. And so when you talk about dependencies, Ramesh, yeah, right. There's stuff that you just buried in there that you just don't know about. I was reading the SRE thing from Google, and they talk about SLAs, sort of a dependency thing. And they have this big application, I think it's called Chubb or something like that. And the SLA on that application, they meet it really regularly. There are applications that depend on it that expect them to always hit the SLA and actually even to do better. And so what the team will do is they'll take the service down. If they haven't used up the error budget, they'll just take the service down and force anybody that has a dependency on it to handle it gracefully. And if they don't handle it gracefully, well, then in the next sprint, they'll figure out how to handle it gracefully. But it's just an interesting way. That's that mental shift that you talked about, Ramesh, of getting yourself out of the mode of, well, I have to make sure that I'm available, to I have to make sure that people are respecting my SLA, that I have to be as available as I say I'm going to be, that I don't have to always be available. And it's interesting because you start to find those dependencies that you didn't know about.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Just one more thing to add there, Sam.
Please.
Sorry. Doing this, what we also realized was using observability tools was super important on the on-prem side to paint a picture of what we were using and what these dependencies were. Otherwise, you're relying on people who may or may not be there in the organization, or maybe some sort of, whiteboard that was done 8 years ago, and you hope that it's still accurate.
Right.
But what we ended up doing was actually using, some of the observability vendors out there and put those agents on the on-prem side, figured out a bunch of these dependencies, and then started this whole process, because without that, we would be spending months on just doing this over and over again.
Right. Yeah. Visibility helps. Shining the light on things helps, because no matter what is on the wiki, it's out of date. That's sort of just like, it's got to be a law, Murphy's law, some law about it. If there's a wiki that has data on it, it's out of date.
A lot of our customers use the observability tools to actually manage the migration. They sort of set up the baseline of the behavior of the application before it starts migrating, and then they monitor it during migration to understand the differences in operating KPIs and other things, and so that kind of gives them that smoother transition as they're going through it.
Sam, I think we should change every save button in an application to now out of date. Once we save it, it's any plan's out of date. Any day is going to be out of date. Just a matter of moments.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I think we've talked about a few of these already. But, what are some of the things that you expect the folks in the audience that are going through this to encounter when they're doing their migration? We talked about the skill challenge already. And for those of you who don't know, there's a wonderful organization, DevOps Institute, that has a whole host of trainings and certifications available. I know one of the folks on the chat here, I can't find it, but they were asking about certifications and trainings. And that's a lovely way to get yourself positioned to be able to have these conversations, to understand some of the trade-offs and the ramifications as you're going through these migrations. I also think that Phoenix Project book is a great read if you want to sort of bone up on DevOps and the principles and the methodology. So what are some of the challenges that folks will encounter? Mitch, is that you talking already? I'll let you go first.
Yes, I was just going to jump in and say, I think the skills item that many folks selected, well, stop in that poll question. There's probably a lot more underneath just the word skills, and I suspect my experience was also fear, right? Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, which is a lot of the questions around skills and training. But there's also, as you're trained on it, I commented earlier, that I think cloud migration is a contact sport. Planning is essential, but you'll learn more by doing. And that's, I think you have to have that environment where don't bet the farm, but don't do something that's meaningless either. Take some steps and up your risk or up your scope as you go, and kind of build that muscle of what that environment's like altogether. You wouldn't switch operating systems from Linux to something else and then expect everything to work overnight, and you know how to run it and operate it and troubleshoot it. No, same thing for the cloud. Take steps to get there and help deal with that fear.
Play with it, right? Play with it is the best way. The best way to learn is to play, because there's no risk. So yeah, I love that idea. If you can find things that help you learn and learn the way that the workflow is, it's different. We've talked a little bit about that in a couple of different segments here. Just because of the capabilities, it allows the workflow to be different. It allows the workflow to be a lot more fluid, which is really lovely. Let's see, Mike, What are some of your thoughts here? What are some of the challenges that you've seen your customers run into that you could warn these nice people about?
Yeah, so what you just mentioned, the workflow is different, but unfortunately, a lot of times you're not allowed to change the workflow. So you go to the cloud, and the cloud just becomes another data center in the sky that's twice as expensive and twice as long to get stuff out. So I always say the technology is easy, the people are hard. And it's a lot of organizational silos. It's a lot of processes that were built for biannual releases from the mainframe days that are holding back success in the cloud, right? I've seen teams that were able to take a request from the business and deploy it to stage same day. That would take 3 months to get to production because the change management process didn't change to go with it. I've been on projects where we were helping clients build their initial landing zone, and it required a purchase of a new tool. And the project was 3 months long, and the procurement process was 6 months long. So do the math there. That doesn't work. So, cloud is bigger than learning microservices and getting AWS certs. Cloud is organizational transformation, top to bottom, which is why some of the things we talked about earlier start small, right? You can't change the world in a day, but right now, most of the incoming requests that I'm getting as a consultant is about reliability. And it's not that people haven't been building reliable systems all along. It's just they moved to the cloud with the same mindset, and now things are breaking, and their SLAs are blowing up. And the management's blaming the cloud, but the fact is they just took the data center and moved to the cloud and expected the same result, which doesn't work. So I think there's a lot of political challenges, right? We're trying to create full stack teams, and people don't want to give up their people. There's a lot of security challenges where, security could be reluctant to do things, or they may say you must use this hardware appliance, even though we're in the cloud over here. It makes no sense. So most of the challenges I run into that prevent cloud from happening at scale within organizations are the people and process challenges.
That tracks for me, for sure. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Mike. Let's see. Ramesh, I think that you probably have some really good experience helping people with this too. What are some of the problems that obviously everything goes super fantastic whenever you're doing the migration, but for other migrations that other people work on, what are some of the challenges that people ran into?
Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind are buy-in from leadership. Right. I think that is very critical. It has to be, your leadership needs to be behind this, all the way. Right. I mean, somebody needs to be passionate about it. And that really helps drive this whole thing. The other one is having, like I think I mentioned earlier, like having these business drivers, right? A business problem that you're trying to solve, because then now you have folks from outside of technology who are vested in that whole process and really want to have it succeed. So there are a lot more opportunities, a lot more leeway given to you, and there is not as much pushback. If there is a failure, for example, I mean, it is, it's typically in those kind of, if you have those buy-ins, it's taken as a learning process. It's taken failure as a learning process, as opposed to being penalized for something like that. So those are some of the mindset changes that we have typically seen. I mean, what we typically do is we try to be a little bit more proactive with this, right? So we go in and we say, hey, we have, we can come up with some prescriptive guidance in terms of, again, coming up with your business driver, your innovation, your data insights. That's the other thing, right? I mean, how do you get value from data? And so again, goes into like an observability, like collecting all that information around applications and so on, and making some sense out of it, and even from a business application point of view, right? And then finally you have, and all of that kind of ties into the migrate and modernize aspect of it. So if you have that modernized infrastructure, then you can build on top of that and actually not just get data insights, you can actually, now you're driving your business based on that. So you kind of tie in all of that. And then, again, the dependencies are, business alignment, people, operations, security, platform, all of these are kind of the underlying underpinnings of these drivers, right? And so you kind of take in, and those are all like iterative processes, right? So you go through with every migration project, with every application, workload, whatever the case might be, you kind of build on top of that. But essentially, you're kind of aligning everybody towards common goals.
Yeah, I think alignment is, the older I get, the more alignment is the only thing that matters. I see that so often. That's great stuff. I appreciate that, Ramesh. All right, let's see. Malik, I'm going to go to you next. What are some of the things that you would recommend people not do, or what are some of the challenges that you encountered that you'd want to help steer people away from?
Sure. I think the team covered a lot of them, so I won't go over each one. The one thing that we did, assume is you're going to have failures. Things are not going to work as expected. So assume that, just like I think Mitch was saying, it's a contact sport, right? You're going to have to dip your toe in and you're going to hit issues. Just assume that's going to happen and be able to recover from that as part of your planning process. Because if you go in the mind thinking everything's going to work just perfectly, it's going to be a big disaster. And the other thing is your cutover, right? In our case, it's just not a straight up, I'm going to flip the switch and it's just going to work. It's like a slow drain, if you will, from the on-prem to the cloud. So make sure you understand how that's going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's having load balancers or being able to write to two different databases at the same time, whatever the case may be. But have those pieces thought through on the cutover itself, because it's not going to be a one switch that you flip, because you also may have to stop it. You hit an issue, you want to go back to your old on-prem migration, or sorry, on-prem infrastructure, and that
So Malik, sorry to interrupt, but is that another dependency then? Are we saying that you have to be able to really be able to do things like canary deployments or blue-green, or?
Yes, to an extent. I don't know if I got blue-green, but more being able to have the ability to flip back and forth fairly quickly in case of issues. That's part of the thing we learned. At least the first iteration we were doing a staging cutover, we learned a whole bunch of things from it, and made that a much better process. And now we have it down to pat. But that's the key: is assume you're going to have failures, so be able to recover quickly or be resilient.
Yeah. Well, that's the muscle memory. I don't know if somebody mentioned muscle memory of that, which is such a great term. I use that all the time, because if you haven't done it, a fellow named Scott Prue spoke at one of the DevOps Enterprise Summits a while ago, and he had this concept of, he was at CSG, and he had this concept of a game day team and a practice team. And the practice team practiced all week. And on game day, the game day team came out and they were ready to go. But they hadn't practiced all week, so I had no idea what they were doing, right? So you don't want to have two different teams. You want one team, and you want them to be practiced and building that muscle memory all the time. So I totally love that. I love that. Okay, very good. Anything else to share there, Malik? Or I'm going to hand it off to Bruno to help close us down.
No, I think I'm good.
Awesome. All right, Bruno, what are some of the challenges that you think people are going to encounter?
Most of it was covered, but I would say that, again, it's for us, we talk about vision alignment, sort of the cloud vision alignment with customers, which really just means to us philosophical sort of buying into a different operating model. My perspective is that your data center is, as different from a mainframe as it is from the cloud, even though the cloud data center might look very much like your data center, might have virtual machines and all these things. I think it is that fundamentally different than your data center. And I think once you, as an enterprise, sort of adopt this mindset that you are now consuming as a service, and take that philosophy on, then you will avoid all of these traps. And, one of the things that I'm not sure to what extent it was mentioned here, but, try to really think about what you're bringing along with yourself to the cloud, right? All of the sort of old tooling versus new tooling, cloud native versus not, all these things, right? So it's not just about what does your code look like? What are you using to store data? Are you architecting microservices? It's also, what are you using to operate, secure, and manage those workloads, right? Because they are as important, because if your application all of a sudden can scale 10 times more, your tooling better be able to do that as well. Because if it doesn't, it's going to fall over and you're going to be running blind, right? So that's another challenge that needs to be thought about as you're sort of moving your workloads up.
I love it. I love all the comments. I love all the questions from the audience and the comments in from the audience. That's what makes this, not that the folks on the panel don't make it special, but the interaction with the audience, I think, makes it really special too. I do have an announcement for a couple folks in the audience who are our Amazon gift card winners, which is pretty cool. Anscar F, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing these names correctly. James G, Darlene W, and Kelly B. Look for some communication for you to pick up your $25 Amazon gift card, which is super exciting. So what a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate. Oh, what is a successful migration? We didn't do this one. What does a successful migration look like? We didn't even get to that one. We had too many amazing things to talk about. Does anybody want to give me 3 minutes on this? Anyone?
We'll let you know when we see one.
That is a classic. That's a best answer. I like that.
I'm not touching that.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess a successful cloud migration looks like one that is always going, that keeps going. Would that be a successful cloud migration? Or eventually you get to where you don't need to migrate to the cloud anymore? Is there
one that delivers results?
I think delivering value at speed. You have a few projects that can turn around and meet the business requirements. You don't have to have your whole portfolio, but just a couple apps can really change the game for your business.
That's what is successful. Well, I guess you could also just look at Automation Anywhere as an example of a successful cloud migration. Is that fair, Malik?
Fingers crossed, yes. We're still on the journey. I don't want to call it done, but yes, it's a journey, and we're getting.
It's a journey, and I think that's probably the most important thing that I would take away from this slide is what does it look like? It's always happening. A successful migration is still happening right now.
I mean, usually a business use case drives some of these things, right? I mean, we have talked about all of these things. I mean, if all those conditions are met and the business is in sync with you saying, yes, we are getting what we wanted out of this, I think from I would call that as a successful migration, because at the end of the day, you served your customers the way you wanted it.
Net positive above 50%, not bad either, which we had. So I think that's pretty good.
Nice. Very nice. All right, everybody. Well, I want to special thank to the panelists for joining and sharing their knowledge on this topic. It's a fantastic topic. It's obviously one that resonates with the audience. I want to thank the audience for joining us on this conversation and taking part. And we will see you next month. And we're talking about reliability management, which we've talked about reliability here. So look for that. That should be an exciting one. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.